What is up, you guys? Welcome to the Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian. And we're reporting live from the cancelled bunker. We are unacceptable. If you listen to this on YouTube, it means we didn't fuck up twice.
Yeah.
Our video of our last episode, Twinko de Mayo, got taken down off YouTube. We got a community guidelines or community standards strike against our YouTube account for spreading COVID misinformation. Just want to make it clear to the YouTube algorithm right now, we don't actually think that a bowl of nuts emanates a protective field against COVID. That's not what the CDC says. And we recommend you follow all social distancing guidelines and wear a mask, spray your groceries down with Lysol, spray your eyeballs down with Lysol, and cower inside your home forever. Yeah,
the true treatment is like ginkgo and like...
No, don't say that. No, there is no magic treatments for COVID. I looked at the list.
Well, that's not for being a bitch.
That might treat you for being a bitch.
At YouTube, they could all kind of use that.
Yeah.
They just don't want to see us win. They really just want to see like twinks and post-twinks not win.
It's true. They sent us a very helpful list of all the things you're not allowed to say as well.
Perfect. Any good ones?
I'm trying to remember. Let me pull up the list. I kind of like wasn't expecting to talk about this, but as we started talking about it, I'm now aggrieved. Turns out I'm madder about this than I thought I was.
Yeah.
It was actually funny to me.
They're really just silencing my voice.
Wait, what's second time doing what?
Of being banned.
Oh.
My first time on Twitter. I was banned.
You banned from Twitter.
Technically, it's our third time because the first time was our election debate video, and they shut us down for streaming the actual.
That was just copyright. Yeah, that's fine.
We were reading commentary. That's fair use.
All right, so here, let me read out a few of the things that you are not allowed to say. So it's preventing treatment misinformation. Content that encourages the use of home remedies, prayer, or rituals in place of medical treatment, such as consulting a doctor or going to the hospital. Content that claims there's a guaranteed cure for COVID-19. We have the cure.
It's sodomy.
Yeah. No, that's not a cure. Content that recommends the use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, whatever the fuck you say that, for the treatment of COVID-19. Wasn't that mainstream, wasn't that at least mooted as a potential treatment? I know it's not
yeah.
It's kind of funny that you can't recommend the use of something. Claims that ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine are effective treatments for COVID-19. That's interesting. Okay, not saying that at all. Other content that discourages people from consulting a medical professional or seeking medical advice. Well, I think we did okay on all those ones. I don't think we ran afoul. Okay, so then claims that wearing a mask is dangerous or causes negative physical health effects.
Well, that's where they got us.
Yep. Claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the contraction or transmission of COVID-19.
They really were like, fuck you.
Claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will cause death, infertility, miscarriage, autism, or contraction of other infectious diseases.
Those weren't negatives. Those are positives. It's
yeah, we were trying to sell the vaccine as a good idea.
Why do you think Greta Thunberg pushes it so hard?
It just says nothing about implying that Microsoft software is good.
That's good.
There is a specific one in here I really liked too. Where is it? Claims that COVID-19 is caused by radiation from 5G networks. Not allowed to say that.
I don't know. I wouldn't even have thought of that. Is that what you both thought?
I mean, I don't know. Videos alleging that the COVID-19 test is the cause of the virus. Interesting.
Oh.
I love just how much this is the world we live in. It's kind of bleak, honestly.
I think it's wonderful.
Claims that people are immune to the virus based on their race. Wow, YouTube does not believe in black girl magic apparently, and will not have you promoting that idea.
Wow.
Claims that COVID-19 vaccines contain a microchip or tracking device.
This is ridiculous.
I'm really struggling because I'm trying to not promote these ideas. And yet, as they come out of my mouth, they just sound eminently reasonable on their face.
I can't believe, I can believe how restrictive they are. I mean, I remember they were banning early on I think it's called the Plandemic documentary, which I have no idea if it's true or not or whatever. I don't really care. But it's this isn't going to help your cause. This is how you make people buy into conspiracies, especially if they're not scientifically literate. You know what I mean?
Oh, wait, here's another one. Sorry, I realized which one we might have actually run afoul of. Claims that the virus no longer exists or that the pandemic is over. I may have shouted several times that the pandemic was over for me. That I was over the pandemic. There you go.
It's over.
To our algorithmic censor overlords, I'm very sorry, and we won't do it again.
It's fun. I love YouTube. We
However,
love our overlords.
Anyway, so just saying, look, all I'm saying is that homosexuality, there is a miracle cure for it.
Can we still say that?
I think we can do this.
Cool.
Homosexuality is caused by 5G signals.
Homosexuality puts implants into your body to be tracked by the government.
Right.
The gay test is also how people
the cause of homosexuality is the gay test.
It's MK Ultra, but it's by making them gay, it's going to see how society functions afterwards.
Yeah, look, and honestly, if you do find yourself contracting homosexuality, I suggest, look, why not try a home remedy, some prayer, or a ritual in place of going for medical treatment.
I will agree, though. Homosexuality is over. We're post-homosexual now.
Yeah.
And
I'm just going to say, if homosexuality is what you're struggling with, I don't think wearing a mask outdoors is really going to help with that. I don't think that's a very effective intervention against homosexuality.
Wear a condom, people. The mask isn't going to do anything. It's in a way they are saying wear a mask, because I don't they tell you to wear masks when you're giving blowjobs, and no one follows that rule.
Right, exactly. It's a similar piece of health advice we're dispensing here on this podcast.
This won't get us in trouble because it's not on a list, but I believe the mask culture from COVID-19 was actually there to force us to give condom-covered blowjobs.
Interesting.
That's my grand theory.
Well,
from Big Rubber. Switching to more real news. Because no one cares that we were banned.
Yeah, all the only interesting only to us.
All the twinks are thank God, shut the fuck up. Big tech has been censoring voices around a real issue. They banned a lot of pro-Palestine posts on Instagram and Twitter, so much so they had to apologize.
Whoops.
The Gaza Fights for Freedom, which was released by Empire Files for free on YouTube, within hours, had it age restricted, moved from subscriptions, and was blocked from all search results.
Well, and I just want to say about Gaza Fights for Freedom is honestly just a spectacular piece of documentary. I think we already reviewed it after we got to go see a screening of it not long after it came out, and I think Mike Preisner and Abby Martin gave a little talk afterwards.
We'll link it below.
Yeah, but I think, obviously if you are watching the news and you're saying, gee, this seems like a deeply complex issue, I wonder what's going on here, and you would like to develop, a direct understanding of maybe the Israel situations, particularly around the current conflict, then Gaza Fights for Freedom is a very nice, unflinching portrayal of all that. And it's mostly about firsthand footage. Mm-hmm. So there's a few little interviews interspersed into it, but I mean, it's primarily they turn the camera on and they point at the IDF soldiers doing bad things, and then Abby Martin gives a voiceover to explain to you how we got here, and it's really good. So highly recommend it.
It goes on. Facebook banned the Lebanese Communist Party official page for posting pro-Palestinian stuff, and then Twitch has been banning people for showing videos like parts of like Gaza Fights for Freedom and stuff on there, and their whole thing was taken down. So
perfect.
Yeah, it's great. Our overlords really showing they care about human lives and stuff.
Well, this is totally tangential, but maybe I'm still bitter about not being able to dispense good advice about homosexuality. Wink, wink. But Twitch is now doing a thing where they're going to investigate conduct that takes place outside of Twitch. So you're not only you're sort of subject to their acceptable use policy and their content moderation policy while you're on the platform. They've actually contracted with a third-party law firm that will manage investigations of allegations of like membership in hate groups, or I think grooming is called out by name as well.
Vouch.
Yeah. Well, you said it, not me.
Allegedly.
So anyway, that's that is what it is. But it just was funny to me that just how shitty this particular world of having turned our entire system of communication over to a bunch of corporations, particularly as it results in it's kind of doing its job in that there's videos coming out of the Israeli attack on the mosque in eastern Jerusalem.
Al-Aqsa.
Yeah, which, be the first to admit some ignorance here, but I didn't realize how close it is to like Dome of the Rock. It's like...
It's in East Jerusalem.
Yeah, but it's right there among the holy sites. And yeah, obviously Ramadan going on now. And what do? Send in just a bunch of like, guys in combat boots to go stomp on some heads and shoot some flashbangs and
destroy some irreplaceable architectural sites.
Right, start beating up, unarmed people.
Yeah.
And then it just has everything fucking kicked off. I mean, it's just like I can't even keep up. So I believe the IDF blew up an apartment building. Multiple apartment buildings.
And they just destroyed an orphanage. They've killed, I believe the death toll is 45 Palestinians, which includes 14 children. I mean, it's hard to tell because the numbers keep adding up.
Yes, they keep getting higher. So that was, 2 days ago now. Then white phosphorus starts being dropped onto Gaza. Which, think about it, this unrest is going on in Jerusalem.
Yeah, but it's
then there's unrest, right? And what do? Just literally, you take this open air prison that is a tiny strip of land that doesn't quite abut the ocean because Israel claims it actually has land along there, so that it can completely enclose Gaza. And then they start dropping white phosphorus into essentially, one of the densest pieces of land on Earth, the most densely populated on Earth, from helicopters. And this is all on camera. Like, that's the thing is like, in the same way that those who maybe look with horror at police violence in the US and say, what the fuck? It's right there on camera. Like what more do you need? Well, honestly, like for the people wringing their hands about Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, if you're fucking hovering a helicopter over one of the most densely populated cities in the world that is deeply under-resourced, does not have a lot of infrastructure.
Already in rubble.
No means to say, already mostly rubble, and you start firing white phosphorus indiscriminately.
Yeah.
What more evidence do you need of the horror of this?
There was a video that came out of a journalist, which they shipped to their camera because they're covering like the journalist and medical personnel dressing like people injured in the attacks, like Palestinians. And she turns the camera, and an IDF soldier was about to throw a grenade at medical and journalist personnel, and then he stopped doing it. And had to like re-put it back in because he was caught on camera. And it's like, I don't really give a shit about like the international law stuff really that much because like it's all used to like protect the same class of people like that's supporting all of this shit. But it's like if you are like a liberal and care about international law, journalists and medical personnel are protected class. Civilians are protected class. Like, right. These are all like illegal war crimes. So it's the white phosphorus because it's actually being used on civilians. Apparently there's like exceptions if it's only used for like hiding the imagery, it's not covered. But like if it's used to harm people, then it is. But it's like,
well, and it's, I mean, there is a reason that you think about like the bans on some of these weapons under international law, you know, and of between, you know, countries that were in full scale war with each other, and yet they still said, you know, this is a bit too much. Happy to, you know, just fuck up everything and, you know, blow limbs off or whatever, but no, white phosphorus, that's too far. It's just a horrific weapon. I mean, it just burns through skin.
It burns your lungs.
Yeah,
breathe it in.
Can't, you know, it cannot be extinguished with water, basically, and if it is, it'll just come back as soon as it dries out again, so it'll hang around. It's toxic as hell.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just ends up in what little soil is unbombed already, and this is over a civilian area. I mean, it's just horrifying.
So it's all started in the West Bank. It started because in East Jerusalem there's a neighborhood called Sheikh Jarrah. If I butchered that, sorry guys. I don't speak Arabic. But they're basically mass excommunicating and extending, you know, the colonization of this area by bringing in like
settlers,
like dumb settlers from like New York and Russia and shit to replace them. And that kind of started the violence, and they've just escalated it with the mass attack. And then
just in terms of the actual dispossession of the Palestinians, I mean, this is not like we're building settlements. This is literally dragging people out of their homes, and evicting them. It looks the same as, you know, when you see footage of like the sheriff of some town being sent around to like evict people in many parts of the US, right?
More murder though.
Yes, more murderous, but simply to say that the actual like the sort of workaday sort of bureaucratic nature of the state doing this masks just the horror of it, and that they, you know, they're sending around basically soldiers to just drag people out of their homes.
Yeah.
And then replace them with Jewish settlers. And understandably, people are a little miffed about this. They're not okay with this. I don't know why. What would be wrong with that?
Yeah. So it's also like the Palestinians aren't just sitting there and taking it. It's actually getting so much attention because they're resisting. Hamas has broken the Iron Dome, which is like this idea of like protected
missile defense system.
So they are shooting rockets at Tel Aviv. They're
hundreds
some of them are
rockets.
taking arms. Some of them like are mass rioting, and everyone's like, "Well, that's bad, isn't it?" And it's like,
both sides.
It's not bad. You wouldn't like. It's kind of ridiculous because like you would think like anyone fighting against their oppressor is like equal to them. And I saw like Trevor Noah trying to doing this. I'm like, I guess it's fucking stupid. You have a right to fight,
defend yourself.
Like I'm sorry, you like have a right to shoot rockets and shit. Like I don't think it matters. Like you wouldn't. Yeah. It's like saying like, Syria has no right to protect itself, or like any other country, any other people would do the same thing. If we like, the U.S. literally went to war because we got bombed. So it's like, why would the Palestinians who've been under a 70-year occupation not be allowed to like fight this group who's ethnically cleansing the entire population and like starving them and shit?
Right. And like there can be no ambiguity at this point about what the end game is. It's just the removal of the Palestinians from Israel. Israel like has always been very vague about what its borders are.
Yeah.
They've refused to kind of declare what the limits of their territory is, and that's precisely because it's everything. You look at the map and you look at what is currently marked as Israel. It has borders, right? We've got, you know, Jordan, we've got Egypt, and as like it seems like that unambiguously the project is to say, well, that's just going to be Israel. These weird little carved out bits of, you know, disputed territory for Palestinians, a little sliver down, you know, in the southwest corner, and a little sliver over the West Bank, and like that's gone. No, push the West Bank into Jordan,
right?
You know, push Gaza into the fucking ocean. They don't care, like, and that's it. There's suddenly the project is complete, and Israel can, you know, have safe and secure borders without the dangerous threat of, you know, these dissidents and terrorists.
And I think that's so important because I think we're seeing a lot of liberal hijacking of the Palestinian issue, as it's been for the last like 30 plus years. I don't even know, of people like progressive groups like AOC or AOC or I say
AOC or AOC.
Sorry, I was thinking of Bernie Sanders and I said AOC.
Same thing.
Rashida Tlaib and like Ilhan Omar, and they all are like masterful propagandists and this kind of like never actually saying their violence is justified. It's the Gandhi approach, which is like like a bourgeois approach to prevent people from actually armed resistance against their oppressors. And they're also like, they all for the most part believe in like Israel still existing, and that's just, you can't have that. Like Israel is an imperialist project through and through. The only way to like be an anti-imperialist is to not have any Israel. Like it's to have a unified state that's not based in like theocracy, but instead plurinational and like democratic and ideally socialist. But like, but it's like these people are like really good at shifting, and even the BDS stuff. Like I feel like, as I've seen more and more, it's just been used to push people towards means that don't work. It's all consumerism and like individual actions versus like the militant behaviors that actually were the thing that were so effective for groups like the PLO and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to the extent that like I've just been loving watching like people just come on board with this cause today, and that's not like, honestly, whenever people wake up to the horror of it, great, that's good, you know, wake up to the horror. Two-state solution has not been on the table for nigh on 20, maybe more than 20 years now. It basically was not regarded as credible. It was never going to happen. Yeah,
because of Israel.
Well, yeah, I mean, and like, you know, the problem is what people like to do is they like to think back to, say, the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, when there was a lot of like decolonization taking place in the Middle East in general, and all sorts of shifting alliances, and, you know, the Palestinians got fucked in many directions, and yada yada yada. The history of it is sort of less important at this point when you simply say that like there's nowhere to put a Palestinian state anymore.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be viable as a state, and it would have an incredibly belligerent neighbor. So, and, you know, I guess the second point is the reason why I think, you know, the American left gets a little bit weepy about the plight of the poor Palestinians as a sort of, as a symbol, not as an actual set of people suffering, but as a symbol, is that the brutality is very recognizable to us. It's a very American brand of brutality, in fact, and we fund it. I mean,
yeah.
And so, like, you know, ideally, right, the outcome would be the U.S. stops funding Israel in this way. Not going to happen. That's just there's total bipartisan support for our unequivocal, support for Israel, and massive military support of Israel.
It's the mercenary state of the Middle East. It's critical to imperialism in the Middle East. Like, I think people are just kind of like lying to themselves when they think the U.S. would ever even consider ending funding in the same way they would never end funding to Colombia unless something dramatically shifted in their own region. Like, which is also having massive riots. But it's like, you can't just make a capitalist system not act like how it would supposed to, especially when it's the imperial core. Like, it's going to do it. The only way you can change that is to either change the U.S. politically and which class rules it, or you have to dramatically change the events in somewhere else, which is sadly mostly up to the Palestinians and its neighbors, which the last few times, most of the Arab nations were kind of like, well, it's not a problem, and they were kind of fucking him over. But now it sounds like more are getting on board. I mean, the Iraqi resistance said they would come and fuck shit up. Iran obviously supported them, Hezbollah, and even like the communists throughout the region.
It's also interesting, I guess, you know, the UN, horrible bourgeois institution that it is, the US is keeping the Security Council in recess. And I believe China is currently trying to bring it back into session.
Interesting.
To offer a condemnation, essentially, which, you know, this is, yeah. I mean, the problem is none of this is new. What is new is it's basically feels like full-scale war right now.
Yeah.
This is, Gaza basically ran out of water already, and the brutality of the blockade, and just you understand that like it's no overstatement to call Gaza an open-air prison, and it's been described that way for a long time, and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
That's like it's a supermax prison now. I mean, it's just monstrous. So the issue is though that slapping a Free Palestine sticker onto something doesn't do anything.
Right.
The point you made about Israel as the sort of foothold or as the broker for the U.S. in the Middle East or in Middle Eastern policy is very true. You think back to Israel, I believe, was the intermediary in the weapons exchange in the Iran-Contra affair.
Yeah.
They were the ones literally brokering the weapons to Iran, which is bizarre when you think about it, but apparently that's how that worked. Israel's been sort of indispensable to all of these foreign policy projects.
They keep bombing Syria and invading Lebanon's airspace.
Right.
Like Sudan was, once they had their like whole like split, which was all imperialist based, was forced to become friendly with them. A lot of Israeli made weapons, because now like they're no longer just like a transmitter, they're like a major weapons producer,
Right.
which they test on the Gaza Strip. Two places like Sudan's like awful, brutal government, and it's like, yeah.
But of course, through all these horrors, our media has been valiantly telling the truth, reporting, just unflinchingly reporting. The New York Post, just literally reported that like Hamas had killed a bunch of Israeli children when in fact it was the IDF had killed a bunch of Palestinian children.
Yeah, they said, they tweeted, airstrikes from Hamas militants killed 20 in Israel, including 9 children. And turns out it was Israeli missiles killed 20, including 9 Palestinian children. I don't think they even corrected it for hours. They just kind of lifted it up, which is not new. They routinely, media will lie and say misinformation because people will just say it and spread it, and that's what becomes true. It's not about facts and reality. It's about whoever says the lie first. Like,
yeah. I guess I wanted to say one more thing about the rockets.
Yeah,
it's okay. Would you fire a rocket at somebody kept you in a prison, a foreign aggressive power? Just, if you had the means to fire a rocket, would you fire a rocket?
Yeah, fuck them up.
I'd fire a fucking rocket. Just the hand wringing. It's because it's able to be reimagined as a symmetric conflict, as though there's just two armies going to war, as opposed to a military superpower backed by a military superpower that is Israel, to say, with a massive mechanized, highly automated, modern army, right? Against literally some smuggled weapons and some cobbled together shit that is, historically has been largely symbolic, in the sense that like, since the Iron Dome went up, like the idea that you can sort of like put on a bit of a light show to remind Israel that you're not done fighting.
They broke through though.
Yeah, no, some shit was landing, which, good.
Like, I'm sorry, like everyone's like, that's so awful. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. That's just like the reality. Like, people call Nelson Mandela a terrorist because they also did bombings and stuff, because they were in fucking apartheid. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to just like wait until you're like captors and like ruling class, or just like, oh no, well, you just had a change of heart and we're gonna like free you? I was like, no, like that's not how the world works. That's not how reality works. Power does not just like shift because people have good intentions. Like, well,
yeah, and that's the other thing, is people saying like, well, why don't the Palestinians just lay down their arms and stop being so violent and stop being savages, and Israel will treat them nicely. For one, if your entire family has been killed by these occupiers, I don't know why you'd be quite so eager to just, give them your life too. The other part being that Israel is not a normal place. It's an ethno state for one.
Mm-hmm.
It has no left wing. There's not even libs. Like it has very, very far right and even further right. That's its political spectrum of acceptable political thought. All ultra nationalist, orthodox religious. I mean, it has a state religion and a state ethnicity. The Arabs who live in Israel, yes, there are many.
Mm-hmm.
They're not represented politically. They're not fully citizens. I mean, they're not.
Also, a lot of the Arabs there were brought there because Israeli, like, I don't like using the word terrorists, but like, whatever, militants or whatever, went to other countries in the Middle East and would do bombings and stuff against Jewish people to make, and blame, like, the Arabs and stuff who weren't Jewish to make them come to Israel and places like Iraq and stuff. Like Syria, not because of the war, but also because of this stuff, has like the entire Jewish quarter empty, and it's not because Syria's like, we fucking hate all of you. They've kept it. It's preserved. It's just kind of like empty. Like, well, when if they come back,
they built synagogues and stuff. I mean, that's
Iran has the second biggest Jewish population in the Middle East.
Right. But I guess the other like part about what people talk about, right, is or the concession you're meant to make out of politeness in this conversation is always, well, wait, do you believe Israel has the right to exist?
No.
I remember being cornered at an awkward party by an awkward person and an IDF soldier, and asked that question. And the thing is, like, I think I always had unthinkingly kind of said, well, yes, of course. Like, I mean, look, I mean, there's a set of people living there, and do they deserve safe lives? I mean, yeah, I believe that's true. I believe everybody should have, physical safety and material security, et cetera, et cetera. Israel as a state should not exist in its current form, which is to say an ethno-nationalist far-right state that is currently basically running an ethnic cleansing campaign against the indigenous peoples of that land. That shouldn't exist. And a form of a country called Israel could exist, or no, what is it? Israelstein or whatever. There's some blended, portmanteau.
It's just Palestine. It's Palestine in the fucking like religious books.
Oh, you mean Palestine?
Yeah. I mean, like.
But this I guess just the point being that this can't go on, or this should not go on. I mean, it will go on because it's a kind of inevitable consequence of imperialism. But the current form of Israel should not exist, and this it's not to call for regime change. It's to call for dare I say and sound like an anarchoid abolition.
Yeah, it just needs to be gone. Like, there just needs to be, like...
It needs to be completely replaced by something else.
And there has to be major concessions, I think, if you're going to have a unified Palestine where Jews, including those who immigrated there, and the local Palestinians are to live in, like, some sort of, like, unity. Like, you have to give the houses back to the families that are still alive. You have to, like, give land back. You have to you can't just like be like, oh, well, we're united, but we're not going to change any of like the land or like the means ownership. Like, there needs to be some major restructuring, just like you had in like South Africa or like Zimbabwe or whatever. Like,
right. I mean, I guess the issue though is that like there's no end game here. There's no leverage. Firing rockets into Tel Aviv or whatever is like all good, but it's like all that they'll do is drop more white phosphorus. I mean, like, and the only restraint on Israel seems to be that they might go a little too far and piss off some neighbors, all of whom they now militarily dominate as well. I mean, I like, I'm no military strategist or whatever, but I just like, I'm trying to imagine like if any of sort of like the 6 Days War or anything occurred today, it would be very different. Israel is not I mean, Israel has, a massive air force and an advanced military, a huge standing army. Like what? So there's not even that sort of check on them. The only restraint on Israel has to be a threat of the U.S. withdrawing their unequivocal, unconditional support. And that's not going to happen under Democratic Congress and under Biden.
Yeah.
Because they have no greater friend.
I mean, the only other way would be like the other major powers and like the Arab League nations like completely joining against Israel, but like that's also just gonna cause a World War III. Like it would. Like if Russia, who is quite friendly to Zionism, and China, who does military exchanges, they do with like all countries, because they have a neutrality, which I think is stupid. But I think supporting Israel. I think it's not trot. It's just like you don't have to give weapons to Israel. But if they were to actually like hold them accountable, that puts them in a corner, and the U.S. and the dumb European countries besides Ireland will back them up, and that's not going to end well.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's
fuck them up, Hamas. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, we can wish them well. I don't know. Wait, no, sorry. We wish homosexuals well in their effort to overcome homosexuality.
Well, that's also the thing. People are like, oh, well, it's Hamas shooting it, and they're anti-communist. It's like, I'm sorry. When do we
they're
like
anti-gay
say, like,
too?
They're anti-gay. Oh no, they don't deserve the right to have self-determination and human rights.
Herd them into a prison and starve them to death. That seems like a fair punishment for, social homophobia.
Yeah, like saying like, oh, resisting your dominators is good isn't the same as saying like, I support your ideology through and through. Like that's just like no. Yeah,
no, whatever. They probably trash. I don't care. It's if it's to the extent that that's the sort of that's the nexus of power for resisting whatever's going on. I mean, there's just not much else, and that's the problem. There's not much even in this country. There's no fucking ability to persuade your government to change their view on Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Like many have tried. Who do you lobby? Like there's not even in Congress. Like think about our brave squad or my fellow radicals with AOC. Yeah. They are all on board with this shit. They'll offer a blanket condemnation of violence on both sides. That's what you get out of these people. Not stop the fucking spending.
Yeah, I feel like all these people who are like vote blue, and they're like the poor Palestinians, like you're all full of shit. Like they're literally full of shit because you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, well, I'm against prison mass incarceration, and I'm against endless corporate greed and mass imperialism, but I'm gonna vote for the party who does all the same shit. Like everyone knows that like Republicans do this shit too, but like I'm not saying like vote for them. It's just like don't vote for the Democrats. They need to be crushed. Like no way.
Right. We have to reform our politics, and this is the like what's fucked up and feels so hopeless about this situation is reforming our own political system feels like an impossible task most days.
You can't vote it away.
No, exactly. And, we have to reform our political system in order to basically have any hope of reforming the situation in Israel.
Yeah.
What a fucking lose-lose situation that is. I guess it means there's everything to win, right? I mean,
yeah.
But maybe, I guess that the sharp point with the sharp edge it puts on all of this is to say that like, this is the horror of the empire.
Right.
And reforming the empire has many benefits.
Yeah. It's just kind of like a lot of theatrics because people don't know what to do.
Right. That's the thing is, that's all we're doing. I'm blustering about the fact that this needs to change, but I don't have any theory of change here. I have no mechanism for change.
I don't really see it ending until like you change to ruling class of the U.S., which I honestly don't see happening anytime soon. I mean, you never know, but I'm like, it's kind of like that's where the effort should be, and it sucks to say, and your protesting probably feels good and maybe makes people in other countries like Palestine feel like at least they're not like forgotten, but that's all it's doing. It's not really doing anything to stop it. Like Israel doesn't give a fuck if you like millions protest or whatever. America doesn't care. Like we had millions in the Iraq war and we massacred millions of people. So it's like it doesn't really do anything.
Well, and so maybe this goes back to the only tactical advice I have to offer, or tactical approach I have to offer is you mentioned you can't vote away the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of can. You can ensure their complete and utter defeat. Yeah. And in their place, like whatever fills the vacuum of the Democrats could be the thing that you would use. Maybe you have some terms on which to offer your support to whatever comes after that. And maybe that's the mechanism you could use to at least stop some of this.
Yeah.
But at the moment, because we all vote blue no matter who, and it's an unconditional support, they can just get away with this shit. You can have a president who, was on the floor of the Senate. And yet he's saying, like, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. Yeah. Because it's there's no greater. What is it like? It's in America's interest. I'm paraphrasing Joe Biden very poorly, but he basically said it's in America's interest for Israel to exist. And if it didn't exist, we would have to create it. Yeah. That's who you get. Do not fall for these people.
Yep. My advice, vote anyone but blue, because the only way you're going to have a genuine, like, working class left come up is if you make them lose all faith in the Democratic Party, right? Because people still buy the illusion. And we've seen like that it's kind of already happening. Like they're going to like Trump or Bernie for in the 2016 campaign. And
well, but Bernie's cucked the Democrats.
But I meant 2016, not right now.
Yeah, sure.
Or just not voting, and that's big. Most people.
No,
don't
I think
vote.
you'd have to vote against them actually.
Well, I mean, yeah, but like more people aren't voting.
Yeah, no, they must be. It's the Grim Reaper going from door to door. The Democrats have to be first, and then you go after
some accelerationism.
Yeah,
kind of.
I think you do. I'm not usually into it, but
it's kind of true.
I watch. I can only watch so many cell phone videos of IDF soldiers shooting children before I'm like, you know what? I think the Democrats just need to be destroyed at all costs. I don't think there's any cost too high to get rid of them first. And then we can talk about what we do.
Also, your COVID relief money in the bill included massive wealth transfers to Israel. So congratulations. Yep. You all became homeless and lost your jobs to help a Zionist shithole murder children who never asked to be in a situation in the first place.
Great.
Switching to more fun topics. There was a recent trend of mostly from awful like shit live imperialists, but it was gay Iranian Alireza Fazeli Monfared. I butcher all of the names.
I think you butchered that one, but good effort.
He was, according to a report, killed via an honor killing in Iran. And like obviously this happens all over the world, so people probably don't think it's very important. But the groups pushing it is, for one, Gay Inc., the gay media, and all the same regime change advocates like Masih Alinejad, who's like funded by the U.S. State Department to do basically like Radio Free Europe kind of shit in Iran. People at the Atlantic Council, Scott Wiener.
Well, you should back up a little bit. So, 20-year-old gay man in Iran.
Yeah.
Very cute.
Yeah, he's very cute.
Was beheaded in an honor killing by his half brother and cousins.
Yeah.
Because I guess he had declared his homosexuality as part of his military service exemption card. Which there's just listen to those words again. That as part of the official state apparatus, you can say I'm gay and get out of military service in Iran. What have you learned through this? Oh wait, I thought you just were executed by the state for being gay in Iran. What? You're not?
They turned him down after discovering his homosexuality. Right. And they
so
told the family.
And so he was intending on leaving going to Turkey or seeking asylum in Turkey to be with his boyfriend. All very sad. Like nothing gets the poor dead kid. I mean, like shit. What's interesting is that, Gay Inc. wheeling out all the Iran is officially homophobic. We must, save the poor LGBT people there. What they always bury in the story, if they report it at all, is his killers are arrested.
Yeah, that was the biggest part where I kind of everyone kind of mentioned as if that wasn't a big deal. Like you would believe they would be like, well, it's fine. You killed a gay person.
Right. And no, the killers are facing murder charges.
Yeah.
So it's an honor killing, which is horrible. Horrific killing. Very sad. There's a lot of, details offered about his poor mother, who clearly was pretty distraught about her gay son being killed, et cetera, and interviews with the boyfriend who's already in Turkey and things like that. So anyway, it's a fucking horrible, tragic story. The problem is just the ghouls trying to use it to tell a story about some official state policy of Iran, as opposed to the brutal nature of honor killings, which honestly they occur in the West just as they occur anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
also the mom was called because so obviously the family, I feel like we don't know if they knew, but if there were, when I heard the news, wasn't like, oh, well, good. She was in shock and went to the hospital after hearing the call of oh, you're come to the trees in the woods because that's where your son's head is.
Yeah. No, that's, and so the idea that homophobic, killings are, put it this way, it doesn't say anything about the country. It's not to say that Iran's great on gay rights or whatever. Make no such claim. It's not. Yeah. It's more just the foolish kind of, or the easy innuendo of saying an honor killing took place in Iran. Therefore, this is official Iranian state policy. In the same way that people try and do this thing in the UK, where you got places like Bradford in the north or whatever, where there has been a number of high profile honor killings. People try and say that this means that actually these northern towns in the UK are under Sharia law.
Yeah,
it's well, no, there's not state policy.
Right.
It's worth just teasing them apart to say, yeah, there's people there who hold those views and are violently enacting them. Iran is, complicated on gay stuff. It's complicated. It's definitely not. It may, for whatever laws are on the books, it's not like there are no gay people in Iran, and even quite visibly gay people in Iran.
Right.
Is there street violence? Is there harassment? Is there official violence? Yes, sure. All those things happen. That's true everywhere.
Yeah.
That's true literally everywhere, except in the fucking suburban bubbles in fucking US and UK or whatever, where people are oh my God, white gays are not even oppressed. That's new. That's new, bitches. This was the reality that I grew up with. I grew up with the idea of fucking street violence against gay people being a normal thing to experience and to observe. Jesus fucking Christ.
I mean, it still happens in New Zealand. I feel like I've heard more cases from people there than I have in
of course it does.
Anywhere I've lived.
No, but that's the thing. We fucking honestly thought we were gonna get the shit beaten out of us, and you certainly did experience shit. And that's the problem, right? It's some TikTok fucking 17-year-old Zoomer saying actually being gay is to be an oppressor or whatever. I'm look, this is the world we live in. Is that some poor kid in Iran got beheaded.
Horrific.
In the same way that plenty of people in towns across America, big and small, are still getting the shit beaten out of them or killed for being gay.
Yeah.
You just don't care about it because it doesn't really matter anymore.
Well, it's also selective on which countries we focus on. Cameroon, I just saw on Twitter, arrested 2 trans women for secretive entrapping homosexual acts and are imprisoned. I believe it's illegal there. And it's I wonder why you chose Iran of all the countries instead of Cameroon. Do you really believe if we had a regime change there, it would suddenly just massively liberate LGBT people? No, I mean, maybe any secular country would probably push there a little bit, but it's that's not guaranteed. And we know the U.S. doesn't give a fuck if it's Islamist or whatnot. We just care if they go with U.S. foreign policy or not.
Right. Yeah, and so I don't know. There's something so cheap and vulgar about using what is a genuinely very tragic murder.
Yeah.
And it's a very sad story. I mean, there's a nobody likes to see a vibrant young man murdered in horrible circumstances. But the kind of step of implication people so easily just wobble over into just without thought is, therefore, regime change in Iran.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there's a step there. I mean, yet again, like all of Eastern Europe, just, you talk about just like official homophobia.
Yeah, and how it skyrocketed once like these right-wing parties backed by like the EU and the US and NATO took power. I mean, look at Poland and Hungary, like
right. I know the entire Pacific, most of Asia, like there's just
we can look
the fucking most of the US, like
Iraq and Syria, like there was like New York Times piece about like, because like both countries are like relatively secular, having like underground gay scenes and stuff. Like technically like it wasn't legal in Iraq, and like Syria it was, but it was pretty rare. And like there was a gay tour group that used to travel throughout Syria, which stopped after the regime change stuff. So it's like, why do you have no proof? Even like Michael Lucas, the gay porn star, actually wrote about this in a Pink News fan about like how regime change actually tends to be really bad for gay people because it often brings in the most radical elements within these Middle Eastern countries. Like people forget
it's a siege mentality
that
you look for the enemy within.
Iran became an Islamic theocracy because we removed the initial like secular government of
yes, we just keep putting the Shah in, took out Mossadegh, and put the Shah in twice more. Lo and behold, it resulted in some rather hardliners taking over. Go figure.
Wow, riveting.
And yeah, I mean, it's just such a sad indictment of just the baby brain version of what gay rights meant in an international sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just strikes such a chord with me because the idea that to be gay in general, call it a gay man or lesbian or whatever, was actually to be in danger where you lived, potentially.
Yeah.
And that's kind of faded away for a lot of people. And so that's great. That's a good outcome. The problem is that now there's this selective outrage of like, oh, well, actually, that nobody's in danger unless they're in a brown country with the bad people in power. And like, it's like, no, you have to understand that there is still a fundamental danger in being openly gay in many places in the world, including probably where you live.
Right.
And there are settings where that's not safe. And so, I don't know, it's why I just like scoldy libs who have just moved on to the next culture war. And just regard, gays as the oppressor. Now I'm just like, oh, fuck you, man.
It's like really shitty to weaponize someone's tragedy for your imperialist agenda, like to make his like rise to like
just martyrdom.
Martyrdom is kind of like disgusting because it kind of like even it doesn't really even take account to like who he was or whatever. It just kind of you weaponizes him for whatever political agenda, and right now it's purely just everyone in the imperialist system. It's like, all these foreign policy magazines and these like NGOs like the Atlantic Council. It's the State Department media, and it's even like the Democratic Party, like Scott Wiener, who are like all like rabid Zionists who just like hope for Iran to be destroyed. Like it's like,
right.
And it's like, you're all like disgusting. Like you're not good for anyone. This is why like gay rights by itself is not a good analysis. Like it's not like it's bourgeois dominated.
Well, it's certainly, that's the thing is when a gay rights movement was tied to actual like physical and material safety, that's when there were stakes to it. when it becomes a kind of like intellectual armchair exercise of like, who are the good people and who are the bad people who use the right words or whatever. It's like, well, no, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. How very dispiriting. If I'm murdered in a gay hate crime, please invade the U.S. to liberate all the poor LGBT souls.
Yeah. But our last topic, some good news, which, I mean, not good to everyone, but I think it's good news. Labor did not rebound after, COVID and stuff in the recent elections. They lost.
They turfed it. Into the ground.
They
at
really
speed.
fucked up. The Tories, the Conservatives, took a bunch of seats, including in traditional working class neighborhoods. Scotland's basically dominated by the SNP, who I also don't like, but that's separate. Yeah, and I think I saw a really good post. It was from Jody Brar, who some people who were like, she's the one that like Caleb gets called a TERF for because she's like a gender essentialist, I believe.
Okay, so but she has some ideas.
But she's like a communist and stuff, and she was like, this is actually good. She's part of the Workers' Party, which is a new party, which had a bunch of people on ballot. And was like, this is good because any destruction of the idea of social democracy is a win for working class people. And I think she was correct in that analysis. I think crushing the social dems is good because they don't represent the working class, especially now. Like, I'm sorry, but they need to be really kind of grabbed by the balls, but like just slammed to the ground,
Well, so Alexia Aurora wrote a piece on Substack called "How UK Labour Lost the Working Class," and subtitled, "By taking for granted its working class voters, Labour migrated towards young, educated and professional class voters. As its new voter base became repulsed by the old, the Tories picked up the red wall." Mm-hmm. And we'll link Alexi's piece, which is really good. And it's there's a lot of like kind of wonkish like electorate by electorate analysis in it, and it's a fascinating read. And it's got a good history of sort of Blairism in the party. I'm sure, people will Labour diehards who just were like, any guy in a suit with a painted on smile will do.
Yeah.
Will probably not much care for it, but I thought it was very insightful. And the funny thing is, it's like the UK is just doing the same thing a little slower, as in, these arcs have been running in many of these sort of failed global north social democracies, essentially, where it's like you get neolibs drifting into further and further, or sort of this accelerated pace of neoliberalism. And what's left behind is any kind of working class base. And at some point they say, fuck you.
Yeah, it was also really lame. Jeremy Corbyn was like backing Labour. And I'm like, that's so cocked. Like, you're just like the British Bernie Sanders. Like
he's a little braver on Palestine. But
yeah, but like they only smeared him to the ground and made him like shit a bunch of like policies on things that were politically popular, like Lexit, like the left, Brexit, which people want. We literally know people don't want to be part of the EU.
I've just because I opened the article, I've just reminded of the fact that I'd completely forgotten that Ed Miliband hired David Axelrod, who was Obama's campaign manager, to run his campaign, and then clearly they just horrible. They lost all the European elections or whatever. David Axelrod is such a funny character to me because like, talk about like tripping over your own dick and still like sticking the landing. Mm-hmm. People think that anybody involved in the Obama campaign is some sort of political fucking genius, as opposed to that Obama was just a sort of uniquely once in a generation charismatic candidate who could have been running on any platform. Yeah. Obama could have like stood up and just like recited Hitler speeches and he still would have won.
Right.
I just like, Yeah.
Also, Bush was that bad.
Yeah, exactly. The whole country bringing a collective sigh of relief, Hillary being just a sort of uniquely unqualified candidate to run against anybody with even a slight little bit of charisma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, people fucking think David fucking Axelrod is some political genius as opposed to like the Obama presidency being incredibly ineffective, but the Obama campaign being successful because, you know, not to get all great man theory on it, but like, dude, the guy was very charismatic.
Yeah.
Like, there's very few people who look at Obama and say, oh, the other guy, the shuffling corpse of John McCain is better.
I mean, my whole childhood was like Michelle Obama being on like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon doing like guest appearances on shows, or like the healthy fitness like thing, like which was like a Disney Channel thing.
How dare she?
And it's like they were so like good at being the media people, which obviously the media class supported, so that's why they were allowed. Like it's like Trump was blacked out of all of that, but it's like they were also good at it. Like they were like,
I mean, Obama's still a charismatic guy. The funny thing is, you know, there's very few former presidents I can stand to watch interviewed or speak. Bush, I mean, just monstrous.
Yeah.
I still can't get over the blood on his hands.
he's so
fucking Carter, even when he was young and spry, still just seemed like just sort of this monstrous, disfigured character. Obama, when he speaks still, you're like, I see what I and others saw in him.
Yeah.
I still think he's horrible, but like it's still clear what his appeal was.
Mm-hmm. It's also, I think people are still missing some of the lessons, which I know like Alexei mentioned and other people have mentioned, like the communist left of the UK, like actual communist, not like Ashtikar, like who's like a fucking
literally
loser.
A communist.
But like everyone knows Brexit was a huge thing, but they also supported like the kind of Scottish independence, like, and as a result, we're seeing SNP rise, and it's like you're literally
Scottish Labour is incredibly uninspiring. You're
literally splitting a vote because they also have like kind of like this like social dem bureaucratic model, but it's around the Scottish independence, which failed the first time. And apparently because they did so well, they're going to do another one. And I think that's a great disservice to working people. Like, I know people are like, oh, it's imperialism to have like control over Scotland and Wales. I don't agree. I think Scotland is not a separate, it's not a nation. It doesn't fit the requirements if you're like...
Wow, sounds like bloody Southerner talk to me.
Well, it doesn't. They were also imperialists. Look at the role of the Scottish and British occupation of the Caribbean and stuff. Like, I'm sorry, that's not...
Well, arguably the Scottish were colonial subjects of England.
Mm.
There's some deep monarchist lore in all of this around exactly when Scotland got its hands on the crown versus being subjugated. But
there's a lot of commingling between the ruling classes of the two. I mean, but now it's like over the EU issue, and one wants to stay in, and one's kind of like lost that battle, which is like England. But also like you're splitting up the working class. Like this is not the issue. Like having two separate ruling classes in two different countries doesn't do anything for working people. In the same way, like, I don't know, balkanizing like any country like doesn't help working people unless it's like by like actual working people gaining power. But that's not what's happening here.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, to think about like workers in the north of England versus workers in the south of Scotland, the thing that binds them together is I can't understand a fucking word either of them says.
They're British.
Yeah.
Like they are.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I think we've hit our quota here, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
fuck Labour. Don't support Israel.
And remember, mosques are not a good solution to outdoor homosexuality.
Also, Assad is daddy.
Well, I don't think anybody will be upset about that.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.